I was 18 when I finally got a car of my own. It wasn't anything you'd look at twice, a 2007 Toyota Corolla. Paint chipped along the doors, a dent in the rear bumper where someone had clearly backed into a pole years before. But the moment the title was signed over to me, it didn't matter what it looked like. It was mine, paid for with crumpled paychecks I'd earned stocking shelves and mixing paint at the hardware store all through senior year. To anyone else, it was an old beater. To me, it felt like freedom. 4 wheels and an engine that could take me anywhere that wasn't home. I grew up in a forgotten town in northern Vermont, a place called Ashford Hollow. Blink once driving through, you'd swear you missed it. A single grocery store with flickering fluorescent lights, one gas station where everyone knew your car before they knew your name, 3 churches, because apparently we needed that many for the same God, and a greasy spoon diner that hadn't changed since the 70s. Those were the landmarks. Most people never left, and the ones who did rarely came back. You could feel the weight of that in the air, like the town itself held people in place. Home wasn't much of a refuge. My dad picked up construction jobs when he could, but he usually lost them just as fast, drinking more than he worked. My mom pulled overnight shifts as a CNA at the nursing home out by the woods, always exhausted, always gone when things boiled over. When she was away, Dad would stagger in, reeking of beer, temper already lit, ready to pick a fight with anyone in range. Nights were full of yelling, his voice sharp, hers breaking. Plates shattered, doors slammed, sometimes the walls even shook. By the time I walked across the stage for graduation, I'd grown numb to it. I stopped trying to argue, stopped trying to stop him. I just left. That's what the Corolla gave me, an escape hatch. When voices rose, I'd grab the keys, slip out the door, and let the hum of the engine drown everything else out. I'd drive until the fighting was just a faint memory behind me. Sometimes I circled the same roads for hours, no destination in mind, just motion, the blur of trees rushing past, the steady rhythm of the tires. It was enough to trick myself into believing I could outrun the house, the shouting, the weight of Ashford Hollow pressing down. "Gabe," my mom told me one night, her voice flat and tired after Dad had stumbled out to pass out in the bedroom. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a chipped coffee mug between her hands. "Don't let this place trap you. If you need to go, then go, but don't let yourself get stuck here like me." Her eyes had that distant look, the one people get when they realize they've built a cage around themselves. It might have been the closest she ever came to saying she regretted her life. That night, the one that burned itself into me, came in late September. The air was sharp, filled with the damp smell of fallen leaves. I'd gotten home just after 10 after closing at the hardware store. The second I pushed open the door, I heard them. Mom's voice, tight and desperate, rising above the clatter in the kitchen. "You can't keep spending what little money we have on booze," she said. "And you can't keep riding me like you're perfect," Dad shot back, his words slurred but hard. The scrape of a chair against linoleum. Then the crash of something breaking, maybe a plate, maybe more. My stomach clenched tight. I didn't even bother unlacing my work boots. I turned right back around, keys in hand, heart racing with that same old mix of dread and relief. The Corolla coughed to life, dashboard light flickering the way it always did. Gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled out, leaving the voices behind. By midnight, I found myself on Hollow Creek Road, a narrow 2-lane cut that wound deep into the woods, far from the highway. Nobody drove it at night unless they had a reason. Hunters heading home, teenagers looking for a place to drink. For me, it was the opposite. It was silence. A place I could breathe. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my face. The night sky was clear, the moon high and pale, silvering the ridges of the pines that lined the road. The longer I drove, the more the tension bled out of me. For the first time that night, I felt something close to peace. The sound of home swallowed by distance and the quiet promise of the road ahead. That's when I saw it. Something small, dead center in the road, about 50 yards ahead. I eased off the gas, squinting into the sweep of the headlights. At first I figured it had to be a deer, or maybe a raccoon frozen in the beams. But as the Corolla crept closer, I realized it wasn't moving at all. It wasn't even alive. It was a car seat, a baby car seat, planted upright in the middle of Hollow Creek Road at nearly 1 a.m. "What the hell?" I whispered, tapping the brakes until the car rolled to a stop. The engine idled rough beneath me, the dashboard light flickering like it always did. I just sat there, staring. A child's seat, sitting perfectly straight like someone had taken the time to set it down carefully. My first thought was trash. Someone must have chucked it out of a truck bed. But why here, on a road barely anyone drove, miles from town? Why upright? Not toppled in the ditch like any other piece of junk? That's when I heard it. A faint sound carried on the still air. Crying. Uneven, muffled. The unmistakable wail of a baby. My hands clamped the steering wheel. My pulse thudded against my throat. I cracked the window wider, listening hard. The sound was definitely coming from the car seat. No. No way, I muttered. Every part of me screamed to drive around it, to hit the gas and not think twice. But the thought rooted me there. What if it really was a baby? What if someone had left their kid out here freezing in the woods? The idea twisted my gut. Before I could talk myself out of it, I killed the engine and pushed the door open. Gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out. The night air cut sharper now, colder, biting at the skin of my face and hands. "Hello?" I called, my voice catching before it echoed through the trees. The crying went on, thin but steady. My breath fogged in short bursts as I edged closer, one step at a time. The seat looked so ordinary in the glow of my headlights. Blanket draped over the top, straps hanging loose. Ordinary except for the fact that it was sitting in the middle of nowhere. Kneeling down, I reached out. My fingers trembled as I pinched the corner of the blanket and pulled it back. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a baby. It was a doll. A cheap, plastic-faced doll, its painted eyes staring up at me, its tangled synthetic hair matted against the fabric. Taped to its chest was a tiny speaker, wires poking out through the straps, looping into the harness. That was the source of the crying. As I stared, the sound faltered, warbled, then cut out completely. Silence. The woods went still in a way that didn't feel natural. No insects, no rustle of leaves, just a dead, waiting quiet. And then, movement. Not straight ahead, but off to the right, maybe 20 feet back among the trees. Something shifted against the bark. My head snapped toward it. A figure leaned out from behind a trunk. The car's headlights only reached so far, but I could see enough. A face, or something shaped like one, peering out. Its features didn't line up right. Too long here, too shallow there, as if someone had stretched or bent skin over bone and called it human. My throat tightened. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over myself as I rushed toward the Corolla. The figure tilted its head slowly like it was curious, like it was studying me. That broke me. I bolted, slamming the door shut and hitting the lock button in the same breath. My fingers fumbled the keys, but the engine roared to life on the second try. I shoved the car into drive, swerved around the seat, and floored it. I didn't dare look back. The rearview mirror pulsed at the edge of my vision, but I kept my eyes forward, knuckles white on the wheel. My heartbeat thundered in my ears so loud I could barely hear the engine. I didn't let up until the houses of Ashford Hollow came into view, headlights bouncing off street lamps and mailboxes. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house was silent. No yelling, no dishes breaking, just the faint tick of the Corolla's engine cooling in the dark. I stayed there nearly an hour, gripping the wheel so hard my hands ached, staring at nothing. I thought about calling the cops, but what could I possibly say? That I'd found a crying doll wired to a speaker in the middle of the road, and something with a broken face was waiting for me in the trees. They'd never believe me. Even now, I don't know if it was real. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But I'll never forget the way the air shifted around me, the silence pressing in, the sense that I had stumbled into something I was never supposed to see. I never drove Hollow Creek Road again. Not once. Because I know, deep down, whoever placed that seat there, whoever leaned out from behind those trees, they weren't finished. It was a trap, and I had almost stepped right into it. I've always been the kind of person who notices small things when something feels off. The way someone lingers a second too long when they look at you. The flicker in their voice when they realize you've caught on to something. Even the unnatural silence of a road that should be filled with sound. That night in 2017, all those little things came together. And even now, years later, thinking about it makes my stomach tighten like I'm back there again. I was 23 at the time, just out of college, and dating my girlfriend, Hannah. I'd grown up in Ohio, but Hannah was from South Korea. Her family lived just outside Daejeon, a city big enough to buzz with life, but not as overwhelming as Seoul. Early autumn had settled in when we flew over, the air crisp but not yet bitter. The trip was partly because Hannah missed home, and partly because I wanted to see where she came from, the streets and rhythms that had shaped her. We stayed with her Aunt Min, a lively woman in her late 40s who never seemed to sit still. She thrived on the chaos of the city, the neon signs, the crowded sidewalks, the swirl of voices and scents that hit you the second you stepped outside. She'd laugh about it in the mornings over breakfast, pouring tea until my cup overflowed. "The noise makes me feel young," she said, shaking her head like she was both joking and serious. Still, sometimes she admitted it drained her too. Too many cars, too many people pressing in from all sides. Hannah and I had planned a week-long stay. Most days we tagged along with Aunt Min for errands or wandered through the city together. For me, those first days felt overwhelming. Markets jammed with bodies, signs I couldn't decipher, aromas from food stalls that I couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore either. But Hannah was my anchor through all of it. Her hand slipping into mine as she guided me, her calm voice translating and explaining, grounding me. By Friday, we wanted a night to ourselves. "There's this little place outside the city," Hannah said, tucking her hair behind her ear while scrolling on her phone. "It's about 45 minutes away. They serve these old regional dishes. My dad used to take me there when I was a kid." I smiled. "Sounds perfect. I've just been eating whatever your aunt puts in front of me. Maybe you can keep me from embarrassing myself with the menu." She laughed, nudging me with her shoulder. "Don't worry, you'll survive." We borrowed Aunt Min's car, a silver Hyundai that smelled faintly of pine from the little tree-shaped freshener dangling from the mirror. The sun was gone by the time we pulled out, the city lights thinning behind us until only the highway stretched ahead. First came the dim street lamps, and then, eventually, nothing but the pale spill of moonlight. At first, I felt at ease. The steady hum of the engine, the soft music on the radio, Hannah humming quietly along, it all blended into something calming. Fields of rice blurred past, their shallow water glinting faintly under the night sky. The air felt sharper out there, cooler against the glass, like we'd crossed into another world where no one else existed. About half an hour into the drive, Hannah eased her foot off the gas. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice low. I squinted at the side of the road. At first I thought it was a scarecrow propped up in the fields, a dark figure motionless, then jerking its arms in uneven swings. But as the car crept closer, the headlights caught him. A man. His clothes were caked in dust, his hair plastered damp against his forehead. He staggered into the lane, waving desperately. My hand tightened on the seat. "Should we stop?" Hannah bit her lip, keeping her eyes on him. Her fingers curled around the wheel. "He looks panicked." The man stumbled up to the driver's side, bent over and gasping like he'd been running for miles. His words tumbled out in fast, jagged Korean. I couldn't understand a single thing, but the desperation in his voice, the way his chest heaved and his hands shook, made my stomach knot. Hannah lowered the window just enough so she could hear him. "What's wrong?" she asked in Korean. He sputtered through an explanation, his voice cracking, his finger jerking toward the dark stretch of fields. Hana's brow furrowed as she listened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned back to me, her voice low. "He says he was hiking near the hills and got lost. He's been wandering for hours. He wants a ride back into town." I frowned. "Isn't it a little weird to be hiking this late at night?" I whispered. Hana hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. "Sometimes people do. I don't know. He seems desperate." I felt a wave of guilt at the thought of refusing. I didn't want to be the foreigner who turned his back on someone asking for help. Finally, I nodded. "Okay, but just be careful." Hana reached over and unlocked the back door. "Get in," she told him. The man slid into the seat behind her, muttering, "Go whoa, thank you," under his breath. His voice was breathless, but his relief sounded almost rehearsed. I turned slightly in my seat, stealing a glance at him. His skin was blotchy and red, his eyes darting everywhere but at us. At first I chalked it up to exhaustion, but then Hana's fingers froze, clamped tight around the steering wheel. "What?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Her eyes flicked toward the rice fields. "Look." I followed her gaze. The grass shifted just slightly, but it was enough. Half hidden in the tall stalks, two other figures crouched low. My pulse slammed into my throat. One of them moved, and the moonlight brushed across a pale face. The man in the back seat stiffened instantly. He must have noticed us noticing, because the look on his face transformed. The wide-eyed panic he had shown outside melted away in an instant. What replaced it wasn't relief, wasn't fear. It was something colder, sharper. His flushed cheeks weren't just from exhaustion. It was the look of someone caught in a lie. Hana snapped something in Korean, her tone clipped and controlled. I didn't know the words, but I recognized her strategy. She was buying us time. Her hand fumbled for her phone. She pressed it to her ear, speaking rapidly, as if answering a call. Her other hand clamped down on my arm hard, like she was grounding herself. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward the figures crouched in the grass, then back to us. He didn't move, but the expression on his face said everything. He wasn't scared anymore. He was disappointed. Hana didn't wait. She slammed the gear shift into reverse, the tires shrieking against the asphalt as the car jolted backward. Then she spun the wheel, throwing us around, and floored it. Gravel scattered as the Hyundai lurched forward, back down the road the way we had come. Neither of us dared to look behind us. The silence in the car was unbearable, heavy enough that it pressed on my chest. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. Hana's hands were welded to the steering wheel, her knuckles bone white. Finally, I croaked out. "That was... Jesus, Hana. What the hell was that?" Her eyes were wet, but she didn't look at me. I don't know, but they weren't hikers. We didn't make it to the restaurant. Instead, Hana drove us straight back to her aunt's apartment. We locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and sat in the living room with the TV on, the noise nothing but a shield against the silence. We didn't tell Aunt Min. How could we? Hey, we almost picked up a stranger who might have been setting us up for something we don't want to think about. There were no words that would have sounded believable. A month later, Hana sent me a link. It was a local news story. 2 people had gone missing near that same stretch of road. The article claimed they'd been drinking and wandered off into the hills. Authorities searched, but found nothing. I stared at the headline for a long time, trying to swallow the unease. The rational part of me said coincidence. But in the back of my mind, I kept seeing the way that man's face changed the second we spotted his friends. Not frightened, not pleading, just disappointed. Maybe they were drunk hikers. Maybe it was some bizarre prank. But deep down, I know even the prank explanation is far too optimistic. I never went back to Korea after that trip. Neither did Hana. Some places leave shadows you can't step out of. Shadows that follow you, years later, every time the night feels just a little too quiet. I never used to think much about where I lived. Back then it was just home. Nothing special, nothing you'd brag about. I grew up in a quiet county in Western Virginia, a place that clung to being rural long after everywhere else started changing. For years, the big town in the county barely counted as one. A couple of grocery stores, a Walmart, and 3 or 4 fast food joints huddled around the highway. 10 years later, though, it feels like it's been swallowed whole. Now it's all traffic lights and chain restaurants, strip malls with identical facades, and parking lots crammed full of SUVs. I avoid it as much as I can. The stop-and-go traffic, the endless neon, every visit leaves me drained. That's why moving out into the country a couple of years ago felt like striking gold. I found this little rental house, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Out there I had peace, real quiet. Nights were black in a way that's hard to explain if you've never lived away from streetlights. If I walked outside without a flashlight, I couldn't even see my own hand in front of my face. There was no steady hum of traffic in the distance, no light bleeding over the horizon, just a ceiling of stars, crickets rasping, a dog barking somewhere far off, and those long stretches of back road that seemed suspended in time. Still, the quiet wasn't always comforting. Sometimes, it turned on me. Out there, when the dark settled in, it was absolute. And when I was driving those roads alone at night, it was too easy to feel like I'd slipped off the map, that I was the only living thing left. That night, I swear I'll never forget it. I was driving home after a late shift, bone-tired, eyes burning from staring at a screen all day. My dash clock read 11:48 p.m. I remember thinking, asterisk, just 12 more minutes. You'll be home by midnight. Normally I'd have stayed on the highway, but earlier that evening there'd been a wreck, and word was traffic was still crawling. My choices were clear: sit for 40 minutes inching past the flashing lights, or cut through the back road and save myself 10. I didn't hesitate. Mill Creek Road wasn't new to me. Narrow, cracked in places, sure, but I'd driven it enough times to know its bends and dips. My coworkers always made comments when I mentioned it. Too many deer at night. Too dark out there. They'd laugh nervously, like they weren't entirely joking. I'd shrug it off. I just wanted to get home. The moment I turned onto Mill Creek, the shift hit me. The last street lamp fell away in the rear view, and suddenly my high beams were the only thing keeping the dark at bay. The road looked like a tunnel, branches of old oaks arching together overhead, the fresh spring leaves weaving so tight they swallowed whatever moonlight was out. I kept the radio low, more for company than anything. A soft background hum to fight the silence pressing in. Just get home, I muttered to myself, gripping the wheel tighter. The first stretch was fine, a couple of curves, one long straightaway. I pressed the gas a little harder, my body leaning forward like speed could shorten the distance. My eyes caught something. A quick sway up ahead, a branch shifting. Probably a raccoon, maybe just the wind. Nothing stepped out. My shoulders loosened. But then I hit the next bend. That's where I saw it. At first I thought it was, God, I don't even know. A flag, maybe. One of those oversized garden flags hanging limp in the road where it shouldn't be. The shape was tall, narrow, swaying slightly. I slowed, squinting, trying to piece it together. And then my headlights washed over it. Not a flag. Not anything close. It was a woman, standing dead center in the road, facing me. She wore a long, flowing white dress that shimmered under my headlights as if it had been stitched out of light itself. Across her chest hung an orange reflective sash, the kind you'd expect on a crossing guard, only it wasn't fitted properly. It drooped crookedly, sliding off one shoulder. Her head was crowned with a small red fez hat. Out there in the middle of rural Virginia, It looked like a costume borrowed from a dozen different places and times. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "What the hell?" I whispered under my breath. I eased off the gas but didn't stop. As I crept past her, my headlights filled in her features. She wasn't young, late 50s, maybe early 60s. Her glasses were thin, wire-rimmed, catching little glints of the light, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were so pale and sharp they seemed to glow, as if the blue in them had been sharpened into flame. But what really froze me wasn't her clothes or her age, it was her face. She was smiling, wide, too wide. Her lips stretched tight and unblinking, like a grin that wasn't connected to anything human. And then she moved. She bent her knees, ever so slightly, and began to bounce. A tiny, springing motion, like a child testing the ground before hopscotch. Not a wave, not a plea for help, just bouncing, up and down. Her eyes locked on mine, following me through the passenger side window as though she was inside the car already. I gasped and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car jolted, tires crunching gravel as I tore down the road. My chest tightened, and the thought hit me hard. She's going to grab the door handle, she's going to be in here with me. I couldn't stop glancing in the mirrors, terrified I'd see her sprinting after me with that same awful grin, or worse, that she'd somehow be sitting in the back seat, waiting. Jesus Christ, I muttered over and over, my voice shaking like I was begging the words to become a shield. My hand shot to the small wooden cross dangling from the rearview mirror. I gripped it so hard the edges bit into my palm, whispering every scrap of scripture I could dredge up. My body felt hollow, my chest icy, as if I'd walked into a freezer. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was trembling so badly I nearly killed the engine before the car stopped. I bolted inside, slammed the front door, and twisted the lock like it would actually keep something out. My mom was at the kitchen table, a half-finished mug of tea in her hands. She looked up, startled by the sound I made. Her eyes widened. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. I think I did," I stammered. The words tumbled out of me in a rush. The dress, the sash, the hat, the way she'd stared into my car with that smile, it all spilled out before I could stop. I hadn't finished when footsteps creaked down the stairs. My younger brother Mark stood there, pale as paper, his voice low. "Mom." He swallowed hard. I saw her too. The air seemed to collapse in on itself. My breath caught. "What do you mean you asterisk saw her too asterisk?" I asked. Mark's eyes flicked to mine. He nodded slowly. Same woman, same dress, same hat. She was at the intersection where Mill Creek meets the highway. She stepped close like she wanted to look into my window. I thought she was about to walk right into traffic. I freaked out so bad I nearly rear-ended the car in front of me. They sped off the second they passed her, like they couldn't get away fast enough. Silence fell over the kitchen. My mom, Mark, me. We all sat there staring at one another, the weight of it pressing down until even the sound of the clock ticking felt too loud. None of us dared say it, but we were all thinking the same thing. Whatever she wasn't just some eccentric old woman wandering the back roads. That night, none of us slept. Over the weeks that followed, her story started drifting through the grapevine. Neighbors shared whispers, fragments pieced together like a puzzle no one wanted to solve. Her name was Clara Holbrook. She'd lived her whole life in a little house off Mill Creek Road. Years ago, her father had taken ill. One spring night, she tried to drive him to the hospital. He died before she got there. But she didn't stop. For hours, maybe longer, Clara circled those country roads with his body in the car, too stricken to accept he was gone. Not long after, she lost the house. They said she was never the same again. Some people claimed she started living in the woods, reappearing at odd hours dressed in strange clothes, sometimes waving, sometimes bouncing, always watching. Others whispered darker things, that Clara had died a long time ago, and what people saw wasn't her at all, but what was left. I don't know which story's true. I only know what I saw. To this day, I'll take the long way rather than set a tire on Mill Creek Road. Mark won't even drive it in daylight. Mom warns her friends not to use it either. I hope Clara found peace, if she's even still out there. But if I'm honest, I pray I never see her again. Because when her eyes met mine that night, it wasn't just strange or sad. It was hungry. I had just turned 16 when I finally got my license. For most kids my age, it meant freedom. Driving to school without begging for a ride, late-night fast food runs, picking up friends just to cruise around. For me, it wasn't freedom. It was responsibility. I lived with my mom in a small apartment in Franklin City. It wasn't huge, but it was busy. Grocery stores on every corner, buses rumbling by, people always moving. My parents were divorced, though, and my dad lived 2 hours away in a town so rural you could drive for an hour and see nothing but cornfields, trees, and the occasional leaning barn. Since Mom worked long shifts and money was tight, the arrangement was that every couple of weeks I'd drive out to see him and stay a few days. At first I didn't mind. The drive had this strange kind of peace to it. Leaving the city behind, watching the road stretch endlessly between fields and hills. It felt like escaping noise I didn't even know I was carrying. But the longer I kept making that trip, the more it stopped feeling like freedom. That road turned into something else. A trap, almost. No cell service for miles. No gas stations once you passed a certain point. Just silence and the thought that if anything went wrong, if the car broke down, if I crashed, or if something worse happened, no one would even know. That night stands out because it started so ordinary. I'd just finished helping a friend with homework, left later than I usually did. My mom kissed me at the door and said softly, "Drive careful, Alex. Don't speed, and text me when you get there." "I will, Mom," I told her, though we both knew I couldn't. Not until I got close to Dad's place where service returned. It was late September, the kind of evening where the sun sinks early, and the air has a sharp bite to it. By the time I cleared the first half hour of highway, the sky was already draining of color. My radio was turned low, just enough to keep me company, and I caught myself drumming on the steering wheel to stay awake. About an hour and a half in, I reached the back roads. That familiar unease settled in as dirt and gravel rattled under my tires. Cornfields on both sides, stalks taller than me even from the driver's seat, bent slightly in the breeze. It was like driving through endless tunnels, the moonlight breaking in fragments. Every so often an old mailbox or a crooked fence post would catch my lights and vanish behind me. I'd driven that route dozens of times. I kept reminding myself, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just empty land. Just silence. But that night felt different. 10 minutes into the longest stretch, no houses, no crossroads, just miles of corn, I saw a flash. At first I thought lightning, though the sky was cloudless. Then another flash, sharper, almost blinding. "What the hell?" I muttered, my hands tightening on the wheel. A third flash came, and this time I saw it wasn't the sky. It was ahead of me. On the road. I eased my foot off the gas. My headlights cast that pale yellow cone into the darkness, catching floating dust. The tires crunched softer now. My pulse was a drum in my ears. Out there, you expect raccoons darting across or maybe a deer frozen by the lights. Not this. Shapes. 4 of them. At first they looked like scarecrows stuck in the middle of the road. Stiff, too still. As I rolled closer, barely 15 miles per hour, I realized they weren't scarecrows. They were people. 4 adults standing side by side, blocking the road like a barrier. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, almost choking on my breath. They weren't standing casually. They were facing me, watching. My headlights spilled over their faces, or what looked like faces. Smooth, white, glowing under the beams. Masks. Blank, porcelain-like masks. 2 of them held something long, the shadows showing bats. Or maybe pipes. Another one's hand caught the light again, something metallic glinting. That was when it clicked. The flashes I'd seen earlier weren't random. They weren't lightning. They were signals. They wanted me to notice. They wanted me to stop. And my mind scrambled, panicked, clawing for any kind of explanation that made sense. Farmers, I told myself. Maybe some screwed-up prank. Locals trying to scare off kids dumb enough to drive these roads at night. But my gut twisted hard, and everything in me screamed this wasn't harmless. I was 16, barely 130 soaking wet, sitting behind the wheel of a cheap compact that could probably be broken into with a rock. I didn't have a weapon, unless you counted the old wooden bat in the trunk. But what good was that if they yanked me out of the driver's seat before I even touched the latch? Two choices: slow down, pray they'd step aside and risk getting boxed in, or hit the gas and gamble they'd move before I plowed through. My hands slipped on the steering wheel, damp with sweat. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out the radio, and then I heard my dad's voice, the same warning he gave every time we argued about me driving alone. Asterisk out there, Alex, nobody's coming to help you. You see trouble, you get the hell out. Don't play hero. So I slammed my foot down. The engine roared, louder than I'd ever heard it. Gravel spit and scattered under the tires. My headlights locked on the four masked figures. For a split second, they didn't move. Like they were testing me. Like they wanted to see if I'd really do it. At the last possible moment, the two in the middle dove to the sides. I shot through the gap so close I swear I could have clipped their arms. I risked a glance in the rear view. My breath caught. Two of them were running. Full sprint. Masks glowing white, arms pumping, feet pounding after me like they thought they could drag me out of the car. The sight of it burned into my brain. It didn't look real. It looked like something torn out of a nightmare. Go, 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 I muttered, forcing my foot harder onto the gas. The car rattled, shuddering over the dirt. The wheel vibrated so hard I thought I'd lose control and spin out. My mind flashed with images of them surrounding me, smashing glass with bats, pulling me into the road. The radio was still on, some bright pop song whispering cheerfully in the background. The sound was obscene, wrong, like it belonged in another world. With a shaking hand, I snapped it off. I only wanted the sound of the engine, just me in the car, running. Seconds stretched like hours, but slowly, the figures shrank in the mirror. Their pace faltered, then stopped. The white masks disappeared into the dark. I kept driving. My chest heaved. My hands shook so violently I thought I might lose grip of the wheel. That's when I heard it. Click, click, click. At first I thought it was just gravel stuck in the treads, but the rhythm was too sharp, too deliberate. Nails. They'd scattered nails across the road. By some miracle, my tires held. Maybe they were tougher than I thought. Or maybe I'd just threaded through by sheer luck. When I finally rolled into my dad's driveway, 2 hours later than I should have been, I was pale, shaking, almost sick. My dad stepped out onto the porch, squinting. Alex, you look like hell. What happened? I wanted to spill everything. The masks, the bats, the nails glittering in the dirt. The way they chased me like it wasn't a scare tactic. It was a trap. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came. Rough drive, I muttered instead. He sighed, rubbing his jaw. Told you not to tear down those dirt roads. People out here throw junk on them all the time. Probably kids screwing around. I nodded like I believed him, but I knew better. Those weren't kids. Later, lying in that creaky bed in his farmhouse, I stared at the ceiling and replayed it all. The blank white masks glowing in my headlights. The metallic flashes. The way they stood there, unmoving, until the very last moment. The way two of them ran after me like they weren't finished. And the thought that wouldn't let me sleep, if those nails had worked, if my tires had blown out in the middle of that empty stretch with no service, no houses, no one around, I would never have made it. Even now, years later, when I drive down a back road at night, my chest tightens. Shadows stretch in the headlights that I know aren't really there. my grip clamps on the wheel, and sometimes when the night is especially dark, I swear I see it again. A faint, ghostly flash of white in the distance, waiting. I had this habit that most people would probably think was odd, maybe even reckless. Whenever the walls of my apartment started to feel too close, when my own thoughts got loud enough to choke me, I'd grab my keys and get in the car. I never had a destination. Sometimes I'd cruise under the sickly glow of the city's yellow street lamps, letting the hum of tires on asphalt steady me. Other times I'd take the backroads, the kind where the woods closed in and the darkness pressed against the window so thick it felt alive. It wasn't about wasting gas or killing time. For me, it was survival. My name's Ethan Price. I'm 27, and I've been living alone in a cramped apartment on the edge of Fairmont, a mid-sized Canadian town tucked between lakes and endless woods. My girlfriend of 5 years had left me the previous winter, and the silence she left behind was deafening. Add in the grind of my office job, long hours staring at screens, fake smiles in meetings, and the only thing that kept me from unraveling was these late-night drives. They became my therapy. Sometimes I'd end up at Marston Lake, about 20 minutes outside town. It's one of those postcard spots, picnic benches, trails, families with strollers during the day. At night, though, it's like stepping into another world. If you park at one of the overlooks, the water stretches out black and endless, a sheet of glass reflecting the moon in broken ripples. That Wednesday in late March, work had wrung me out. I dragged myself home around 9:30, nuked some leftovers, stared blankly at my phone for an hour, but my skin was crawling. By 11, I gave in. I tossed my phone on the counter, grabbed my keys, and told myself out loud, "One drive, just clear your head." When I slid behind the wheel, the dash clock glowed 11:07 p.m. I queued up an old playlist, songs I'd heard so many times I didn't even need to think, just mouth the words, and let the familiar noise carry me out of town. Fairmont was mostly asleep, dark storefronts blurred past, their signs humming faintly. I saw a lone gas station clerk smoking under the canopy light, a couple of night shift workers trudging home. But the farther I drove, the thinner civilization became, until it was just me, the road, and the woods pressing closer with every mile. By the time I turned onto the dirt road that wound toward Marston Lake, I'd passed maybe 2 cars in 20 minutes. That road is practically a local legend. Potholes the size of bathtubs, ruts deep enough to snap an axle. People joked it was Fairmont's unofficial suspension test. I slowed to a crawl, weaving left and right, wincing every time the undercarriage scraped. My knuckles ached from gripping the wheel too tight. Finally, I pulled into the gravel lot near the trailhead. My headlights swept over it, and my stomach sank. It wasn't empty. That lot was always deserted at night. Maybe you'd see a single parked car if someone had gone for a late jog. But tonight there were at least 6. They weren't lined up neatly either. They were scattered around the edges of the lot, and one sat awkwardly closer to the center like it had been abandoned mid-motion. No headlights, no cabin lights, just hulking shadows of vehicles, dark and still, as if they'd been placed there deliberately. I eased off the gas, whispering, "What the hell?" The words came out more to hear a human voice than for any real reason. Then, softer, almost joking to myself, "Guess I'm not the only insomniac tonight." But the hairs on my arms were already standing on end. I didn't want to tuck my car in beside theirs. It felt wrong, like I'd be participating in something I didn't understand. So I chose a spot a little closer to the middle, near the awkwardly parked car, but not aligned with the others. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a group had gone for a late hike. Maybe some college kids were partying down by the water. But at midnight, in March, when the cold bit through even a thick jacket, it didn't fit. I killed the engine. Immediately, silence crashed in, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the soft pinging of the engine cooling and the faint rustle of wind through bare branches. Leaning back in the seat, I thumbed through my phone, scrolling without really seeing anything, letting music play low from the speakers just to have background noise. Minutes crawled by, thick and uneasy. Then, at 12:20 on the dot, something happened that jolted me upright so violently I nearly slammed my head against the roof. The silence shattered all at once. One by one, engines coughed to life, the sound overlapping until it felt like the whole lot was vibrating. Headlights snapped on in sequence, beams cutting through the dark like knives. Every single car began pulling out, crawling toward the dirt road in a slow, deliberate line. Everyone except the vehicle parked near the entrance. That one stayed dead still. I sat up straighter, pulse thudding in my throat. "Weird timing," I whispered. Though my gut was screaming at me, it wasn't coincidence. It looked rehearsed, as if someone had given a signal I hadn't noticed. Trying to keep calm, I told myself, "Don't spiral, just let them go. Give it 5 minutes, then head home." But the second I put my car in reverse, the last vehicle in their line halted. Its high beams ignited, flooding my windshield in white. I winced, throwing a hand up to block the glare. "Come on," I muttered, backing out anyway, forcing my eyes to slits against the brightness. The car didn't budge. It just sat there, blinding me until I turned toward the exit. Then, without hesitation, it rolled forward, following. At first, I tried to be reasonable. Maybe they were leaving too. But the way they drove told me otherwise. I crept down the dirt road, weaving through potholes, careful not to wreck my suspension. Behind me, an old black SUV hugged my bumper, its high beams scorching my mirrors. My chest tightened. "Nope. Not tonight," I said under my breath, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I tapped the brakes, a universal asterisk back off asterisk signal. They didn't so much as flicker. The instant my tires hit pavement, the SUV surged forward, practically glued to me. Adrenaline ripped through me. My hands shook as I pressed harder on the gas. 60. 70. The speed limit was 40, but I didn't care. My little car rattled like it might shake apart. Still, they stuck to me, relentless. Fumbling with one hand, I grabbed my phone, thumb searching for the emergency call option. Asterisk. Come on, come on. My stomach plunged when I saw the empty signal bars. No reception. Of course. Out by the lake, you're cut off from everything. I forced myself to think. 2 options. Drive toward town and risk them following me into lit streets, or lose them before I got there. Up ahead, I remembered a sharp turnoff, a tiny overlook above the lake, barely a gravel shoulder. If I could fake them out. My heart hammered as I floored it. 85. 90. The tires screamed against the pavement. The SUV matched me blow for blow, its beams scorching the inside of my car. At the last second, I slammed the brakes and yanked the wheel hard right. The car fishtailed, gravel spraying like shrapnel, the front bumper skimming the bushes. The SUV thundered past, barreling down the main road. I sat frozen, breath ragged, sweat trickling down my temples. The night pressed back in, thick and ringing. I could hear nothing but my own pulse hammering in my ears. After what felt like forever, I forced myself to breathe. It's over. Just go home. Enough's enough. I eased back onto the road, every muscle trembling. When I reached the main intersection, the light turned red. I actually laughed under my breath, relief making me lightheaded. My grip loosened on the wheel. I watched the light flip green, exhaled shakily, and pressed forward. Then I saw it. The SUV. Not ahead. Not gone. It was easing out from a side street that curved back from the lake road, sliding neatly into the lane behind me like it had been waiting. The blood drained from my face. They hadn't left. They'd circled. They knew the roads. They were corralling me. This wasn't just intimidation. They wanted me to go somewhere off the main routes. My body moved before my brain caught up. I floored it, blowing through the green, hunting for the brightest patch of light I could see. Up ahead, a 24-hour gas station, barely 2 kilometers away. "I don't care if I blow the tires," I hissed, pushing harder. The suspension groaned as I hit every crack in the pavement, but I didn't let up. The neon glow of the gas station finally appeared like a beacon. I swerved into the lot, horn blaring, and screeched to a stop. I threw my door open, stumbling out, shouting, "Help! Hey!" at the clerk inside. The SUV rolled up to the entrance. For a moment, its headlights swept across me, pinning me in a wash of white. Then, as smoothly as it had appeared, it turned and drifted back into the night. The clerk, a wiry guy with a cigarette stuck to his lip, stared at me through the glass before unlocking the door. "Jesus, buddy," he muttered, eyebrows raised. "You look like you saw a ghost." I couldn't even answer. My whole body shook as the truth sank in. If I hadn't braked, if I'd pulled into that lookout, if I'd let them steer me where they wanted, I wouldn't be standing there. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I haven't gone back to Marston Lake, haven't taken a single late-night drive, because every time I even think about it, the same thought eats at me. Asterisk, what if I hadn't gotten away? I never really thought about how unforgiving the road could be until that one night cutting through the backroads of Virginia. I'd been driving trucks for close to 8 years by then, and if you asked me, I'd tell you it wasn't just a job, it was a way of living. You either got it or you didn't. The endless hours, the lonely hum of tires on blacktop, the crackle of late-night AM stations fading in and out, and that sharp hiss of air brakes every time you rolled into a rest stop. It wasn't glamorous, but it carved itself into you. I could never picture myself stuck behind a desk staring at a glowing screen. Out on the road, even bone-tired, even half-crazed with exhaustion, I still felt free. Name's Daniel Miller, though most people just call me Danny. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. Dad was a machinist, spent his life grinding away in a tool and die shop until the place went under. Mom was a school secretary. Money was always tight. Tight enough that sometimes it felt like the walls of the house themselves were closing in. I swore as a kid I'd find work that gave me a little dignity, even if it broke my back. Driving gave me that. By 2022, I had a steady route running freight down through Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, sometimes dipping into Tennessee, building supplies mostly. It wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills and kept me moving. The Appalachian stretch, though, that was always a gamble. Scenic in daylight, pure hell after dark. What I'm about to tell you happened one late autumn run, when the air carried that thin, cutting chill that settles deep into your bones. The whole week had been screwed from the start. Dispatch bungled my schedule, so I was behind before I even left the yard. On top of that, my phone charger port had started acting up. I'd grabbed one of those cheap replacements at a truck stop the day before, but by noon it was already shorting out. Battery dropped faster than I liked, especially with the GPS running nonstop. As if that wasn't enough, I wasn't even in my own rig. My Freightliner was in the shop for electrical work, so the company handed me an old International single cab. No sleeper, no comforts, just a stiff seat and a dash that rattled so bad at 55 it sounded like a bag of loose bolts. I kept telling myself it was just for this run, then I'd be back in my truck. By the time I hit the southern West Virginia mountains, it was after 1 in the afternoon. My stomach was eating itself. I'd only managed a gas station granola bar that morning. I figured I'd find a diner or fast food joint, but when I checked the GPS before the phone finally died, it had rerouted me. Some massive accident had shut down the main highway. That left me winding through unfamiliar back roads. I'd trusted back roads before. I shouldn't have trusted these. The asphalt twisted through narrow hollers and over ridges, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. No shoulders, just drop-offs and trees crowding the edge. Old barns slumped against the hillsides, tin roofs rusting or caved in, and trailers sat in fields, laundry lines sagging in the cold air. The kind of place where time feels paused, like nothing changes except the weather. That's when I saw him. A man walking on the right side of the road, his figure small against the mountains. He wore a faded green jacket, jeans, and boots, so worn the toes curled up. His hair was greasy, hanging to his shoulders, and he carried a beat-up duffel bag. Something about him made me slow down. I rolled down my window. "Hey, bud," I called out, trying to keep my tone casual. "You know how to get back to Route 52 from here?" He stopped walking and squinted at me, like the clouds overhead were too bright. His face was lined, tired, maybe mid-40s. "Yeah," he said after a beat, voice dragging with that slow Appalachian drawl. "Keep straight a ways, ain't far, but if you're hungry, you pass the turn." That perked my ears. My stomach had been growling for the last hour. "There's a place to eat around here?" I asked. He rubbed at his chin, eyes flicking toward the woods like he was weighing whether to say more. Finally, he nodded. "Ain't much left these days, but there's Mama Ray's Kitchen, down in the old strip mall couple miles back. Folks say it's the best chicken fried steak you'll get around here." I couldn't help but grin. Better than Cracker Barrel? That got a chuckle out of him, low and dry. Better than all that chain stuff, real food. Something in the way he said it, like he wasn't just selling me on it but staking his pride, made me believe him. I gave a nod. "Appreciate it, brother." I pulled into the next gravel turnout, swung the rig around, and started back toward where he'd pointed. I had no idea I was steering straight into the worst mistake of my life. The strip mall sat at the end of a cracked, lonely road that cut through a patch of dead woods. The kind of place you wouldn't stumble across unless someone told you where to look. The lot was nothing but broken asphalt, with weeds clawing up through the splits. A few storefronts had busted windows, signs bleached by years of sun and rain until they were just ghost letters. But one caught my eye. A weather-faded red sign above a door still clung to life, the words barely legible, * Mama Ray's Country Kitchen. There was a man leaning against the doorway, stocky build, bald head, arms folded like he'd been standing there all day. He watched my truck roll in, unblinking, eyes sharp as a hawk tracking a rabbit. I raised a hand, trying to break the tension. "Y'all open?" I called out through the window. No answer. I killed the engine, stepped down from the cab, and locked it behind me. Gravel cracked under my boots, the sound way too loud in the hollow silence. My gut already prickled. Halfway across the lot, I tried again. "Hey, y'all serving lunch?" Still nothing. Just his stare, fixed and cold, like he wasn't seeing me as a customer, but something else entirely. That's when my stomach knotted. Something about him screamed * turn around now. My heart started to thump. I slowed my pace, fighting the urge to backpedal. "You open or not?" I asked, my voice sharper this time. That's when he moved. His hand slipped behind his back, and for a moment I thought maybe he was reaching for keys or a rag or something harmless. But when it came out, he slid something over his head. Not a cap. A ski mask. In his other hand, dark metal glinting, was a revolver. For half a second I froze. That half second was all it took. From the shadows of the abandoned units, 3 more men stepped into the open. One gripped a crowbar, another twirled a long hunting knife like it was part of his hand. The third dragged a taped-up baseball bat along the pavement with a hollow scrape. They spread out, cutting me off from the lot, from escape, from everything. Survival lit up in my chest. I bolted. "Get him!" one of them shouted, voices echoing against the empty buildings. I hit the door handle, yanked it open, and scrambled into the cab. My fingers fumbled so bad I dropped the keys, cursing, hands slick with sweat as I jammed them back into the ignition. The first blow slammed against the side of the truck, metal on metal, a teeth-rattling clang. "Out of the truck," the gunman roared. He leveled the revolver at me right through the windshield. His eyes were nothing but black holes behind that mask. I did the only thing I could. My foot stomped the accelerator. The engine screamed awake. I slammed the gear shift and the truck lurched forward, tires howling as rubber ripped across broken asphalt. I aimed straight at them. 2 of them dove aside. The one with the crowbar wasn't fast enough. The bumper clipped him hard, throwing him onto the pavement. His scream tore through the air. The gun went off. Glass exploded across my face, tiny shards slicing into my skin. The windshield spiderwebbed and a bullet ripped through the seat just above my head. My ears rang. I dropped low, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles burned. I swung the truck in a wide circle, tires skidding, engine rattling like it was about to tear itself apart. The men scattered, chasing, their weapons banging and scraping against the sides of the cab as I barreled past. I didn't slow down, didn't think, just floored it. The old International roared as I shot out of that lot, strip mall shrinking in the mirrors. I drove blind. No GPS, no clue where the road went, only raw panic driving my hands and feet. My body shook. Blood trickled from shallow cuts on my face and hands. My chest felt tight, ready to burst. After what felt like an hour but must have been minutes, I hit a main road. Neon lights ahead, a gas station. I swerved in, braked too hard and stumbled inside. The clerk froze, eyes wide at the sight of me, sweat-soaked, bleeding, glittering with glass. "Call the sheriff," I rasped. My voice barely sounded human. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the sheriff's office in McDowell County, West Virginia. The place smelled like old coffee and gun oil. A deputy, Sergeant Callahan, took my statement. He was stone-faced, tapping his pen against a notepad like he'd heard it all before. "You're not the first trucker they've tried this on," he said flatly. "Been a crew working these back roads a while. They send one of their own to bait drivers, point you toward that strip mall. Then they wait." The words sank like lead in my gut. I stared at him. "So they use locals? Just normal people?" He nodded, eyes tired. "Family, friends, whole kin networks. Poverty runs deep out here. Folks'll do near anything for a buck, even if it's bloody." I thought of the man on the roadside, the greasy hair, the slow drawl, how ordinary he'd seemed, how easy it was to trust him. My voice cracked. "You catch him?" Callahan shook his head. "Not yet, but we will. Question is..." He leaned back in his chair, watching me carefully. "You gonna stick around to testify?" That night I found myself at a chain diner 2 counties over. The neon lights buzzed above me, the smell of fried food heavy in the air. My hand still shook as I forced down a plate of something hot I couldn't taste. Every clink of silverware, every slammed door made me flinch. But it wasn't the glass or the gunfire that kept replaying in my head. It was the first man's eyes. The way he looked at me before a single word left his mouth. Cold. Calculating. Like I'd never been a customer. Like I'd only ever been prey. And I'll never forget how close I came to being just another missing trucker. Another body swallowed up by the Appalachian hills. So if you ever find yourself out there lost and hungry and some stranger points you toward a place that sounds too good to be true, listen to your gut, because mine's the only reason I'm still breathing. I've always had a thing for driving at night. There's a rhythm to it, the steady hum of the tires rolling across the pavement, the faint glow of the dashboard lights painting the cabin in soft colors. It always used to calm me, like white noise for the soul. I think it goes back to my childhood. My dad was a trucker most of his life, and sometimes he'd take me along on his short hauls. I'd curl up in the passenger seat with a blanket, a thermos of hot chocolate, and the radio crackling through static-filled country stations. Back then, the open road felt like the safest place in the world. I grew up believing that. I don't anymore. Now, whenever I think about those long, dark stretches of highway, I feel my stomach knot. One drive in particular rewired me completely. I was 27 at the time, freshly back in Brookhaven, Kansas. I'd been living in Denver for a few years with a woman named Rachel, someone I truly thought I'd marry. When it ended, the breakup was technically mutual, but only on paper. To me, it felt like she ripped the ground out from under me. Denver didn't feel like home after that. So I packed my dog, my boxes, and my pride into my old sedan, and drove back to Kansas, back to my mom's house, the same place I grew up. It was December, the kind of cold that makes the land look desolate. The fields along the highway were stripped bare, corn long since harvested. The stalks were shaved down to stubble, the soil lying dark and flat, like some drained ocean floor waiting for spring to refill it. There's something unsettling about that kind of emptiness, like the world is holding its breath. That night I'd driven to Wichita to see my cousin Jake. He'd been trying to drag me out of my slump, get me laughing again. We drank beers, played pool, swapped old stories about high school screw-ups. It was good for me, but by 10:30 I was ready to head out. Brookhaven was a little over 2 hours away. I considered crashing on his couch, but Chance, my German Shepherd mix, was with me. I didn't want to leave him cooped up in someone else's place overnight. Besides, I told myself, I liked night driving. At least I used to. About 45 minutes in, I merged onto Highway 63, a 2-lane road I'd always thought of as the loneliest in Kansas. No streetlights, just blacktop threading through miles of farmland and tree lines. Every so often you'd see a battered mailbox at the edge of the road, but the farmhouses were tucked so far back that even their porch lights disappeared into the dark. My headlights were the only light for miles. Chance was curled in the passenger seat, his head resting on my jacket, his chest rising slow and steady. The radio had fizzled into static 20 miles back, so it was just me and the sound of my own humming. The sky outside was impossibly clear, stars scattered like salt over a black tablecloth. On another night, I might have admired it. Instead, I felt that hollow kind of quiet pressing in, the kind that makes you notice your own breathing. Halfway through that stretch, it happened. A sharp asterisk pop asterisk cracked through the silence, loud enough to make me flinch. The steering wheel jolted violently to the right, and I had to wrestle it with both hands to keep from swerving into the ditch. Chance bolted upright, a low growl rumbling in his throat. My dashboard lit up in warning. Asterisk, low tire pressure. Sound __, I muttered, easing the car onto the gravel shoulder. The crunch of the tires sounded exaggerated in the emptiness, like the world had gone silent just to amplify it. When I cut the engine, the sudden stillness pressed down heavy. My breath fogged the windshield as I sat there, gripping the wheel a moment longer than I needed to. "It's okay, bud," I said softly, reaching over to scratch behind Chance's ears. His fur was warm under my hand, but he wasn't comforted. He stayed tense, eyes locked on the darkness ahead, as if he already knew something was out there waiting. Finally, I forced myself to open the door. The cold hit instantly, biting through my jacket. I zipped it up to my chin and fished out my phone, thumb swiping to bring up the flashlight. Its weak beam cut a narrow path into the night. No service, of course. My phone screen mocked me with that little red X over the bars. I crouched by the front passenger tire, breath clouding the beam of light. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just flat, it was destroyed. The rubber had split clean, like someone had taken a blade to the sidewall and dragged it straight through. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, running my fingers just above the torn edge. A chill that wasn't from the December air slid down my spine. I forced myself up, went to the trunk and pulled out the jack and the spare. I'd done this before, it wasn't new, but my chest tightened anyway. Out here, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It pressed in, heavy and unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. Every scrape of metal, every crunch of gravel under my boots sounded too loud, like it was echoing into nothing. I tried to focus, hands numbed from the cold, loosening the first lug nut. That's when Chance barked. Not his playful, excited bark. This was different, deep, sharp, guttural. My head snapped up so fast my neck cracked. Someone was walking toward me. At first I thought my brain was filling in shadows, but no. There was a figure, backlit faintly by my own taillights, moving slowly along the shoulder. Step by step. My hand tightened around the tire iron until my knuckles ached. The figure stopped about 30 feet away. Taller than any man I'd ever seen, 6.5, maybe closer to 7 feet. Too tall. He didn't move, didn't shift, just stood there, arms at his sides, perfectly still like he was waiting for me to make the first move. I couldn't see his face, only the outline, Hello? My voice cracked, thin against the dark. You okay out here? Silence. Chance growled low, his hackles rising, his body rigid as he stared into the black. I swallowed and inched toward the driver's side door, not taking my eyes off the stranger. Do you need help? Finally he spoke. Do you need help? He said. Same words, same tone. My own words, reflected back at me. The voice didn't match him. Too flat, too thin, almost rehearsed like a recording. My skin crawled. Where the hell did you come from? I muttered, glancing around. No headlights, no parked car, nothing but empty fields. Do you need help? He said again, louder this time, and stepped closer. My grip on the tire iron tightened until it bit into my palm. My pulse hammered in my ears. Chance barked so hard his whole body lunged half out the window, teeth bared. But the man, if it was a man, didn't even flinch. Listen, I forced out, trying to sound steadier than I felt. Just stay there, all right? I don't need... He cut me off. Do you need help? Do you need help? Do you need help? Do you need help? The words shot out rapid fire, faster and faster, a broken recording jammed on repeat. His voice cracked with static, mechanical in its rhythm. That broke me. I bolted for the driver's side door, yanking it open with shaking hands. Chance scrambled back inside, barking in wild bursts. I looked back once, just once. He was gone. The road was empty. The shoulder, the ditch, nothing but gravel and tire tracks. My lungs burned as I sucked in cold air, staring at a space that should have held him. My breath came out ragged clouds. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and gripped the steering wheel so hard my hands trembled. A minute later, headlights appeared behind me. Relief shot through me so sharp it made me dizzy. I flicked on my hazards, praying they'd stop. But they didn't. The car glided past, not slowing, not even turning toward me. And in the flare of their headlights, for half a second, I saw him again, standing just beyond the ditch, head tilted, watching. When I blinked, he was gone. I forced myself out, hands unsteady, and finished the tire change as fast as I could. My movements were sloppy. I didn't care. I just wanted to be gone. I threw the tools back into the trunk, slammed it shut, and dove behind the wheel. The rest of the drive was a blur. My knuckles locked white on the steering wheel, eyes darting to the mirrors every other second. Chance pressed his body against mine, whining softly until we finally pulled into my mom's driveway around 2 a.m. I sat there in the car long after I cut the engine, the quiet of the neighborhood feeling wrong, like the emptiness of Highway 63 had followed me home. I never told my mom. Who would believe me? Hell, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Stress, sleep deprivation, maybe I'd imagined it. That's what I tried to tell myself. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. The next morning, when I stepped outside to check the car, I saw them. Footprints, in the frost-covered grass, big ones, leading away from the driveway. And they weren't mine. I've always had a thing for long night drives. There's a rhythm to them. The tires humming steady against the asphalt. The faint static of the radio when you drift between stations. The empty road stretching endlessly ahead. It's not silence exactly, but it clears my head in a way true silence never could. Some people say the night road makes them nervous, that it feels too big, too lonely. But for me, it's always been a kind of therapy. Like all the clutter in my brain finally has somewhere to drain away. Growing up in Virginia, nights weren't really quiet. Even late, there was always something. Neighbors' porch lights bleeding into my bedroom window, cicadas buzzing their endless drone, or the occasional freight train rattling the glass in its frame. Darkness was never total, not the way it is out west. That changed when I moved for work. My name's Daniel Harper. I'm 28. Up until last year, I was doing construction in Phoenix. A big commercial project kept me there for over a year. long enough to get used to things I never thought I'd like. The way the desert highway just swallowed you, how the cactus forests looked like frozen sentries, and that silence you feel pressing against your ears when you kill the engine in the middle of nowhere. I didn't realize how much I'd come to rely on that until I flew back home one winter. Virginia felt crowded, claustrophobic, like the whole world had been crammed into my parents' backyard. At the time this all happened, I'd just finished a little trip near Sierra Ridge, a small desert town about 90 minutes from the house I was renting. My folks were visiting from Virginia for a week, and don't get me wrong, I love them. But 3 straight days of catching up, retelling the same family stories, and watching my mom reorganize my entire kitchen like she was staging a military operation, I needed some space. A reset. So I told them I was going to check out the ridge, maybe hike a bit, and I'd be back in time for dinner. I left around 2 in the afternoon. The hike was fine, quiet. By the time I got back to my car, the sun had already smeared itself across the horizon in streaks of red and orange. That's when the thought crept in. Should I stay the night out here? I'd done it before, sleeping in the car under that sky heavy with stars. The kind of quiet that doesn't just surround you, it seeps into your bones. But I knew my parents would expect me back. And there was this guilt tugging at me. They'd flown all the way out, and here I was hiding in the desert. So I told myself, no, just drive home. Looking back, it's strange how the smallest choices end up mattering the most. The first half hour was uneventful. The highway stretched flat, the stars coming alive one by one. The last bite of sun dropped behind the mesas. I tried the radio, static as usual. Out here, you either brought your own music or you learned to live with the nothing. I glanced at the clock, 8:42 p.m., and figured I'd roll in around 9:30, maybe 9:40 if traffic stacked up closer to town. But there was no rush. The drive itself was the point. Then, maybe 45 minutes from home, my high beams swept over something odd. At first I thought it was an animal, a horse, maybe a stray cow, both pretty common in the area. But as I closed the distance, the shape sharpened. Not an animal, a man. He was sitting on the shoulder, upright but completely still, his head bent forward like he was studying the dirt at his feet. Normally, I wouldn't stop. Everyone knows the rule. You don't pull over for strangers on an empty stretch of desert highway unless you're ready to gamble with your life. But something about him, it wasn't danger that struck me. It was wrongness. Like he didn't belong in the scene I was looking at. I slowed, eased onto the shoulder, and let my headlight stay trained on him. My hand hovered over the window controls before I finally cracked it down. "You all right, man?" I called. No response. Not even a glance. He just sat there, neck bent, eyes down. His clothes were ragged, though not filthy. His hair was cropped close to the scalp, and his skin looked washed out under the yellow cast of my headlights. I put the car in park and stepped out, keeping a safe distance. "Hey, you need help? You stranded or something?" Still nothing. He didn't even flinch. Then, after a long beat, I saw his jaw move. A sound came out, low, uneven, like it belonged to someone else entirely. "I need water." The words froze me, not because of what he said, but how it came out. Flat, hollow, like a voice run through a machine, drained of anything human. Yeah, sure," I muttered, forcing my voice to stay steady, even though unease was already crawling its way up my spine. I turned toward my car, hand already reaching for the passenger side door where I kept a spare bottle of water. The second my fingers brushed the handle, a sharp jolt of instinct hit me like electricity. Something was wrong. I whipped my head back toward the shoulder of the road. The man was gone. My pulse spiked so fast it made me dizzy. The headlights still cut across the dirt, across the exact spot where he'd been sitting motionless. Empty now. Just gravel and brush. My throat went dry. I slammed the passenger door shut, ready to dive behind the wheel and floor it, when I heard it. Movement. The sound of rocks shifting, like someone stepping heavy over loose gravel. My eyes darted to the noise. 20 feet away, another figure pulled itself out from behind the rocks. Taller this time. Dirt streaked his clothes, his skin darker, his eyes wide and wild like a cornered animal. Something glinted in his hand. A blade. He didn't hesitate. He broke into a sprint straight toward me. Shit! I bolted into my car, yanked the door closed, and slammed the lock down with my fist. My hands shook so bad I nearly missed the gear shift, but I jammed it into drive and stomped the gas. The tires screamed against the gravel, spitting stones behind me as the car lunged forward. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of them. Not just the runner, others. 5, maybe 6, stepping out from behind the rocks like they'd been waiting for me. They didn't chase. They didn't have to. They only turned their heads, all at once, perfect unison, their faces locked on me as I tore down the highway. I didn't look back again. Couldn't. For the next few minutes, I drove like a man possessed, every muscle tight, every nerve screaming, half convinced they had a truck hidden somewhere and were already on my tail. My eyes flicked to the mirror again and again. Nothing but black desert swallowing the road. Eventually, I forced my foot off the gas, my chest heaving so hard it hurt. My palms were slick on the wheel. Jesus Christ, I muttered, fumbling for the radio just to break the silence. Static. Only static. I glanced at the rear view one last time, just for reassurance. That's when everything inside me iced over. He was there. The first man. The pale one. Sitting upright in my back seat, hands folded neatly in his lap, head tilted forward just enough to cast his eyes in shadow. But I felt them, not looking at me, looking into me. I slammed the brakes. My seatbelt locked hard across my chest as the car skidded to a violent stop. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. Then slowly, his head lifted. His mouth stretched into a deliberate, awful smile. Soon, he whispered. The same hollow, flat voice. You'll be one of us. Something shifted in his hand. Steel. A knife. The spell broke. I flung the door open and tumbled out onto the asphalt, stumbling on shaky legs. The sound of the back door slamming rang out behind me. Footsteps. Fast. Too fast. He was coming. Are you ready? The voice bellowed. Deeper now, vibrating in the night air. I ran. My lungs burned, my throat clawed for air, but I didn't stop. Open desert on both sides. Nowhere to hide. Then, light. Headlights in the distance, cutting across the black. I waved both arms, screaming, praying they'd see me. The car slowed, pulled over. A man stepped out, late 40s, ball cap, gray in his beard. You all right? He called. I nearly collapsed. No, please. There's a man. He's after me, I gasped, pointing behind me. We both turned. Nothing. Empty desert, quiet as stone. The man introduced himself. Mark. He carried himself steady, unshaken. When his jacket shifted, I saw the pistol at his hip. Relief flooded me, shaky and shallow, but enough. Between gasps, I told him everything, words tumbling over each other, and to my surprise, he didn't laugh, didn't even question me. He just nodded once, calm. All right, he said. I'll follow you home. That drive was the longest of my life. Mark's headlights stayed behind me the whole way, steady, unwavering, like a tether pulling me back to safety. Still, I couldn't stop checking the rear view, expecting that pale face to materialize again. It didn't, only darkness. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I was shaking so hard I nearly missed the gear shift. I thanked Mark over and over, voice cracking. He just tipped his cap and drove off. My porch lights glowed warm in the night, and for the first time I'd never been so grateful for home. But when I opened the car door, I saw it. On top of my backpack in the back seat, paper. A single sheet. I picked it up. Jagged handwriting scrawled across it. Uneven, like carved by a shaking hand. Asterisk, asterisk. You aren't safe. You'll be one of us soon. Asterisk, asterisk. A chill ripped straight through me. My hands went cold, my vision tunneled. Then, footsteps. I spun, heart pounding. Only my mom. She stepped onto the porch in her slippers, squinting at me under the light. The dog threw up in the living room, she said casually. I forced myself to nod, tried to keep my breathing even. I didn't tell her. How could I? She wouldn't believe me. But the next morning, as my parents headed out for breakfast in town, Mom paused by the door. "Oh, by the way," she said almost offhand, "some guy stopped by while you were gone. Skinny fella. Real deep voice. Didn't say much, just asked for you. Left this note." She handed me an envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, same jagged handwriting. Asterisk, asterisk. We know where you live. Asterisk, asterisk. I called the police immediately. They went out to that stretch of road. Found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no trace anyone had been there. I gave them both notes for testing. Weeks passed. No answers. No calls back. Now, I've buried my house in cameras, alarms, motion lights. Anything to keep the dark at bay. Nothing's happened since. Not yet. But sometimes, late at night, when the urge takes me and I find myself back on the road, I catch my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror more than I should. Because part of me knows. It's not over. Not yet. I never used to hate driving at night. Back in college, I'd even sign up for the late grocery shifts just so I could have the road to myself. Something about it felt private, like the world went quiet just for me. The glow of my headlights carving a tunnel through the dark pavement, the silence holding me steady. Growing up in Virginia, those drives were short and familiar. Winding country lanes hemmed in by trees, fireflies blinking along the cornfields, maybe a deer darting out if I was unlucky. Harmless, really. But ever since I moved west, it feels different. Arizona is where I landed. A job with a small architecture firm brought me out here a few years back, and somehow I never left. My parents are still in Virginia, but I stayed. The desert got under my skin in a way I can't explain. Endless, raw, open. I've hiked trails until my legs gave out, camped under skies so crowded with stars it felt like drowning. I've driven damn near every back road in the county, but nighttime in the desert is not the same as nighttime in the woods. Back east, the quiet was alive. Crickets, frogs, leaves shifting in the breeze. Out here, it's emptier. Just the hum of your engine, the occasional rush of wind pressing against the windows, and that sky above, full of so many stars it almost hurts to look. Beautiful, yes, but also unsettling, as if the silence is waiting for you to notice it. That was the night everything shifted. Early spring, warm days that stretched out long but not yet unbearable. My parents had flown in to visit for a weekend, and after dinner in town, I drove them back to the Airbnb they'd rented at the base of the mountains. They wanted their own space, no offense taken. I dropped them off around 8:30, hugged them goodnight, promised to meet for breakfast. I considered just staying over, but I had drawings to review for work, deadlines breathing down my neck. An hour's drive back to my apartment wasn't a big deal. Out here, an hour feels shorter. So I got back on the highway. Radio turned low, letting the desert settle around me. The sun had already slipped below the horizon, leaving a bruised purple sky that faded to black as I drove. My headlights stretched thin over the empty asphalt, carving everything else away. Every now and then I caught movement at the edges, maybe a stray coyote, a wild horse, or just the strange way a cactus catches light. Normal desert things. But about 45 minutes in, that comfort cracked. I was on a stretch I knew well, a curve around a dry wash that spilled into straight road for miles, not a single house in sight. That's when my high beams caught something at the shoulder. A figure. At first I thought it was an animal, a horse maybe, or even a hitchhiker. You do see people walking out here sometimes, though almost never at night. But as I drew closer, my chest tightened. It wasn't an animal. It was a man, sitting cross-legged right on the ground. His back was straight, but his head was bent low like he was staring at the dirt between his knees. He didn't move, not even a twitch. I slowed instinctively, my mind split between caution and guilt. Every instinct told me not to stop. It was late, I was alone, and stopping in the middle of nowhere was the kind of mistake people made right before they became a headline. But then again, what if he was hurt? What if I just drove past someone dying on the roadside? "Don't be an idiot, Daniel," I muttered, but my foot was already easing on the brake. I rolled the window down a crack, leaned out, voice uncertain. "Hey, you okay out there?" Nothing. No shift of his shoulders, no lift of his head. Just stillness. My headlights showed enough to see pale skin, clothes that looked too thin for the night air, flimsy against the desert chill. I pulled onto the shoulder anyway, leaving the engine running. My keys stayed clenched tight in my hand as I stepped out. The gravel crunched under my shoes, sounding too loud. I tried again, firmer this time. "Sir, do you need help?" His head stayed bowed. For a long moment I thought he wasn't going to answer at all. Then, slowly, his jaw moved. "I need some water," he said. The words didn't sound right. His voice was deep, yes, but it scraped, like it was dragging itself up from somewhere it didn't belong, and the sound of it went straight into my spine, cold and wrong. Yeah, I've got some in the car," I said, my voice careful, steadying itself against the knot in my chest. I turned toward the passenger seat, hand reaching for the water bottle I knew was there, but the air around me had shifted. The hairs on my arms rose as if the night itself had leaned closer. When I glanced back, he was gone. I froze. My throat went dry. The space where he'd been sitting was just dirt and shadow now. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking like I hadn't spoken in days. Silence answered, thick and heavy. Then, movement. The faint scrape of stone against stone 20 feet away just beyond my headlights. A figure slipped out from behind a boulder. Not the same man. This one looked wrong. Feral. His hair was wild, tangled, his clothes torn and hanging loose. In his hand, something caught the light, metal flashing in the dark. My chest seized. He broke into a sprint toward me. "Shit!" I shouted, bolting for the car. My hand nearly slipped on the handle, but I yanked the door open, slammed it shut just as he reached the side mirror. I floored it. Gravel spat out from beneath my tires as the car lurched forward. My pulse hammered so violently it hurt. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles burned, breath coming ragged and shallow. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror and my stomach dropped. More figures were there, at least 5. They stepped out from behind the rocks in unison, tall and silent, watching me tear down the road like I'd been lured into their theater. For minutes I drove faster than I ever had in my life, the engine screaming, my headlights bouncing over the uneven pavement. I half prayed, half hoped to see flashing blue and red behind me, to be pulled over, to have anyone else share the road with me. But there was nothing, just emptiness stretching into forever. Finally, my breathing slowed enough that I reached for the radio, some part of me desperate for sound. But then, the mirror again. My chest iced over. He was sitting in the back seat. The first man. The one who'd asked for water. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared straight ahead. Not at me, not even at my reflection. Through me. His eyes looked wrong, hollowed out spaces where eyes should have been. I slammed the brakes. The seatbelt bit into my chest as the car lurched to a stop. My hands shook against the wheel. Slowly he turned his head toward me. His lips curled back into a grin stretching too wide across his gaunt face. "Soon," he said in that voice, the deep scraping voice that didn't sound human, "you will be one of us." He lifted his hand. A knife gleamed in the dim dashboard light. I fumbled at the door handle, panic blind, finally throwing it open and stumbling out. My knees almost gave. I scrambled onto the shoulder, gravel cutting into my palms. Behind me, I heard the car door creak open. Footsteps followed, fast, too fast. Are you ready? The voice boomed now, closer than it should have been, impossibly close. I staggered back, eyes darting for escape, when, headlights. A pair of beams cut through the dark, growing brighter, a car approaching. Desperate, I staggered into the road, waving my arms like a lunatic. The vehicle slowed, then stopped. A man stepped out, middle-aged, glasses catching the glow. He looked startled but steady. "Hey, you all right? Please, you have to help me. Someone's..." The words tumbled and broke in my throat. The man's eyes widened at my panic. He reached into his glove compartment, pulled a pistol, tucking it low at his side. "All right, stay behind me." Together we turned toward my car, empty. The road, the back seat, the desert around it. Nothing. No one. Just my car idling like nothing had happened. I tried to explain, breathless, rambling, every detail spilling out. But he only shook his head. "Look, my name's Mark. I'll follow you home just in case." And he did. For 35 of the longest minutes of my life, his truck's headlights anchored me, a tether against the dark pressing in on every side. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I must have thanked him a dozen times before he left. My legs still wobbled when I opened the back door of my car. Everything looked normal. My backpack, my jacket, except for one thing. A folded piece of paper lying neatly on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words were scrawled in sharp black ink. Asterisk. "You aren't safe. Soon, you will be one of us." The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd hallucinated. Maybe stress, exhaustion, the desert playing tricks on me. Until breakfast. My mom, casual as anything, buttering toast, said, "Oh, by the way, some skinny guy stopped by last night looking for you. He didn't say much, just left this note." She slid it across the table. Another folded sheet. Asterisk. "We know where you live." My heart plummeted. I called the police immediately, handed them both notes, poured out every detail. They searched that stretch of desert road, found nothing. No tracks, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there at all. The letters were tested for prints, for DNA. Nothing. Since then, I've installed cameras, alarms, motion lights, my house now a fortress. At night, I still drive, but never that road, and never without my dog in the car. It's been weeks, but every time I glance at the rearview mirror, part of me braces for it, the pale, grinning face waiting in the shadows. And when the desert wind rattles the windows, I swear I still hear him. Asterisk, soon, you will be one of us. I never liked long drives by myself, but that never stopped me from taking them. Over the years, I'd gotten used to it, if used to it is the right phrase. Growing up, my life was scattered across different states. My parents split when I was 10, and my mom moved out to Ohio while my dad stayed behind in Pennsylvania. From then on, every holiday, every summer, every school break meant shuttling between them. Those same highways flashing by like reels of film burned into my memory. I could probably still tell you which mile markers had the billboards for fireworks, which stretches were always patched with orange cones. By 24, I had my own car, my own apartment, and a job that paid the bills. But night driving still left that familiar knot low in my stomach. I told myself it wasn't fear, just caution, that little edge everyone should feel behind the wheel after dark. But if I'm honest, it was more than that. The road felt lonelier at night, the world thinner somehow, like you were the only person alive pushing through all that blackness. This happened about a year ago. I was heading out on a road trip to visit my aunt and uncle in rural Indiana. I hadn't seen them in years, and after a rough breakup, I figured some family time couldn't hurt. The drive was long, almost 11 hours total, so I split it into 2 days. I booked a cheap hotel in a town called Millstone, just west of Columbus, planning to crash there before finishing the trip in the morning. That first day started fine, even kind of nice. I left before dawn, coffee steaming in my travel mug, music low, That rare early morning optimism filling the car. The interstate was empty, just me and the horizon. A little after sunrise, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, a friend of mine. Asterisk. Tyler. Asterisk. Bro, you actually driving all that way alone? You're nuts. I snorted, thumbed back a reply at a red light. Yeah, man, I'll live. Just need caffeine and music. A minute later, a skull emoji. Typical Tyler. Hours bled together. Gas, fast food, bathroom breaks, then more highway. My back stiffened, my legs ached, but I kept pushing through, humming with the rhythm of the road. Everything was fine until I hit Columbus near rush hour. Construction funneled 6 lanes into 3, and traffic snarled into a standstill. I sat there bumper to bumper, watching the sun leak down into streaks of orange and purple across the windshield. By the time I cleared the city, I was way behind schedule. GPS cheerfully informed me I still had nearly 5 hours left to Millstone. Turning in early wasn't an option. The hotel was already booked. So I grabbed a bitter gas station coffee, muttered, "I'll make it," and forced myself back onto the road. By 10 p.m., the optimism was gone. Fatigue was sinking into my bones, my eyelids heavy despite the caffeine. Every mile marker seemed farther apart, as though someone had stretched the highway while I drove. The interstate was endless and dark, only punctuated by the glare of a passing semi or the rare headlights of another insomniac traveler. I told myself I needed to stop, maybe an energy drink or just a chance to stretch and breathe air that wasn't filtered through stale vents. But the exits were rare. Lonely ramps vanishing into black fields, no signs of gas stations or diners, just emptiness. Finally, a sign appeared. Asterisk rest stop, 2 miles. Relief surged through me. I flicked on my blinker and pulled off when it came up. The place was small, almost forgettable. A squat brick building with public bathrooms, a single picnic table off to the side, and a few parking lot lights buzzing faintly, casting pale cones into the night. No cars, no trucks, just me. The silence was thick enough to hear the hum of the bulbs. I sat there for a moment with the engine idling, gripping the wheel a little tighter than I meant to, staring at the empty lot and wondering why it felt so much quieter than it should. I parked close to the building, killed the engine, and sat for a second listening to the tick of the cooling motor. My body felt stiff and sore, every muscle protesting after hours of sitting. So I stepped out into the night air and stretched until my joints popped. The lot was silent, the kind of silence that makes you suddenly aware of your own movements. The scrape of sneakers on gravel, the sound of fabric shifting when you roll your shoulders. The building was even smaller than I'd expected. Just 2 bathrooms and a little lobby with a rack of sun-faded brochures advertising local caves, parks, and attractions no one ever really visited. No vending machines inside, no humming soda cooler, nothing. I sighed, used the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and headed back out. Outside, the air had turned colder, a creeping chill that settled in the back of my neck. I zipped my jacket, glancing around the empty lot. Maybe the vending machines were mounted outside. Most places had them on one of the walls. I walked around the side of the building, my sneakers crunching over loose gravel. The glow from the lot lights barely reached this side, and the darkness pressed in heavy. Out here, the only sounds were crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind moved through the trees. The back of the building sloped down slightly, opening into a wall of woods, thick and black. No vending machines. I almost turned back, but something shifted in the tree line. At first, I told myself it was a branch, just the wind tugging. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. A man. He was crouched low behind a tree about 50 feet away. His head cocked just slightly like he was studying me. A beard caught the faint light, enough to prove my eyes weren't inventing him. For a second, I convinced myself he was just another traveler, maybe stretching his legs or sneaking a smoke. But then he straightened up. And without hesitation, he stepped out from behind the tree. Every instinct in my body screamed. My chest tightened and my hands clenched. "Hey," I called, though my voice came out shaky. "You okay, man?" No answer. He just walked, slow at first. Then suddenly, he broke into a sprint. Adrenaline tore through me. I spun on my heel and bolted, gravel spraying under my shoes as I rounded the corner of the building. My breaths came sharp and ragged, and behind me I heard it. Heavy, pounding footsteps closing the gap. "Shit, shit, shit," I muttered, fumbling in my pocket for my keys. My heart slammed against my ribs. The car loomed ahead like salvation. I yanked the handle, threw myself inside, and slammed the lock down just as he reached me. His face hit the glass, twisted in a snarl, his hand smacking the window so hard the sound rattled through me. "Open the door," he barked, his voice muffled through the glass but raw with anger. "No!" I screamed, jamming the key into the ignition. My hand shook so badly I almost missed the slot. The engine roared to life. I shoved the gear into reverse, tires screeching as the car jolted backward. He kept pounding, one last slap of his palm against the glass as I shot forward. Out of the lot, up the ramp and back onto the interstate. My hands trembled on the wheel so hard I could barely keep straight. My chest heaved, breaths ragged, like my lungs couldn't fill enough air to keep me alive. I grabbed my phone, thumb shaking as I dialed 911. The words spilled out fast, broken. There was a man. He chased me, tried to get into my car. He's still at the Millstone rest stop. Please, please send someone. The dispatcher kept me on the line, her calm voice asking questions, grounding me just enough until she finally said officers were being sent to check. I never found out what happened. Maybe they caught him. Maybe he slipped back into the woods waiting for the next person to stop. All I know is that for the rest of that drive, I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. Every pair of headlights behind me felt like they were tailing me. Every shadow at the edge of my vision made me flinch. By the time I pulled into my hotel parking lot, it was nearly 12:30. I sat in the car for a long minute, gripping the wheel, heart still hammering, before I finally forced myself out and checked in. That night, I barely slept. Even now, months later, whenever I see a sign for a rest stop on some dark stretch of highway, I keep driving. Because somewhere out there, behind one of those dimly lit buildings, someone might still be waiting.